Yeah, so I was thinking about this. It's interesting because a lot of people often don't view work this way. Um, and work is a means to an end, but it does seem like in objectivism, work is a means to an end as well as it is a means. At least that's what's being said here. Well, my interpretation of it.
Yeah. Well, it can be a means to an end and also an end. I mean, the means to get there, but also it in turn takes you somewhere else further. Um, I'm not. Is that kind of what you're asking?
Oh, maybe I phrased it wrong. Like it seems like so a lot of people view work as a means to an end. In objectivism, it's a means to an end, meaning it helps you survive and
Yeah.
cultivate those values that make your life worth living. So in this case, reason, purpose, self-esteem. But it seems like in doing so, it's seen almost as an end in itself, in the sense that you're gaining enjoyment from doing it because it's making you feel the pleasure of being alive that you get when you have cultivated your reason, your purpose, your self-esteem. I don't know if that's circular, but it doesn't seem like it's this thing you bear in order to pay for a holiday or
Right.
survive.
Yeah, I think that would be getting at like what way should that work be integrated in such a way that you don't feel like it's merely utilitarian, so you don't feel that it's merely just to get a paycheck to say, or even just to work as just a tedious thing you do to support other things. It's almost integrating it further in such a way that it also cultivates self-esteem, that the self-esteem you would feel is pleasurable and that can be a value of itself. Like the self-esteem when you're doing productive work feeds into all those things. It reinforces reason, purpose, and self-esteem.
Right.
If it really is integrated in a healthy way, in a way that your work is actually serves your life and not just an intermediary end.
Mm, okay. Yeah, that's interesting because it would be almost making a case for finding work that really resonates with you as opposed to settling for something in order to unless your work is playing guitar and you're not making money
Right.
from it, and so you just work in order to it is you don't like it, but it's the means for you to work on guitar. Maybe
Yeah, I know it's not really a direct way to phrase it, but at least under objectivism, your work isn't just oh like that story people mentioned. Something it's like you can work all your life so you can live, retire, and relax in the Caribbean or something, or somebody, um, or you could do the reverse that you just live that way anyway from the beginning. Why do you earn the money to get there? Which is it's in contrast to that kind of view that the work is itself rewarding. That you don't use it to like, oh, I'm gonna have this relaxing life at the end of things. You're like making the work as part of your living. It's not just a intermediary thing. That's actually serves a critical function to your purpose and self esteem and your
yeah,
reason. Otherwise, you're not engaging in those that nature of man, and you're not engaging in that spiritual base. Like it would be
that's
kind of empty if you didn't.
it's interesting because okay, you get pleasure from eating food, right? At least I do. Like if it's good food, I'm like
Yeah,
I just want to keep eating more of it. But you don't. It's hard to get that same sense from work spiritually. Like, oh yeah, I'm excited to go to work today. Till it's not like, yes, I can't wait to cook this steak and like boil the broccoli and like it's not
yeah,
it's bizarre because it shouldn't be that way from what I understand, but it does seem to be that way. Um, but objectivism is making a case that it's actually going to be more pleasurable than just a meal because this is a long range sustaining of a life and cultivating other values. But
yeah. Because
yeah,
it also serves into self esteem as well, like
right,
your success at living life.
right.
Like it's part of that. You can't isolate these things that you're doing this work will provide something. You could discuss what the role of leisure is in attaining the quality of life. I mean, leisure does seem to have some appeal, like leisure time of things that really aren't going towards that productive work. Say, if for leisure you play a video game for an hour or something, just it doesn't really serve anything as far as your productive work or survival or anything other than just enjoyment of living. And
Yeah.
it's hard to discuss, and I'm not aware of much where leisure is discussed, but
Right.
productive work is very important. But I'm not sure how to say what role leisure plays. I mean, you might not, you might don't want to just say it. It's because it's a nice life and it feels good. That would be Epicureanism, isn't for, which isn't really big on productivity. It's more about living the good life and just feeling good, just like
Right.
leave a leisurable life, and that's enough.
Right.
And Rand is trying to make an argument, or this Peacock is building the argument that, I mean, that might be nice, but it doesn't give us a spiritual base from which to build other concerns, like a relation to reality and values. I mean, we could say social relationships are leisure, recreational pursuits, leisure, but this is to say that your productive work is more fundamental than
Yeah.
those questions.
So then, all right, let's take someone who's oriented his life towards surfing on the beach, meaning he works a job that is like next to the beach, and it's
Yeah,
just like he doesn't have to work that many hours, and he can just go and surf, and he enjoys the surf. Would that be then wrong? Because he's not really producing anything. He's working. Like, obviously he's working. It's not true he's not producing anything, but his life is orientated not towards any kind of, at least in the objectivist ethics, is not orientated towards a productive purpose. It's orientated towards just leisure and everything.
yeah,
Leisure is the central purpose of surfing.
yeah. The argument would be that wouldn't bring you some like pleasure of like true happiness or
Right.
self-esteem. It won't bring that. It's not to say that surfing can't be made into something productive in some way, that
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
can't be transformed.
Yeah.
But just to say I want to surf all day, ride the waves, and live my day each day like that, then I think objectives would argue that's immoral. I mean, it might feel nice, it might actually be consistent with an Epicurean, but it wouldn't be consistent with this, that you need that productive work to even have this deeper meaning, this spiritual value to your life that goes deeper than that initial
Well,
pleasure.
yeah, I mean, I understand that the claim is making actually you wouldn't be happy, not long-term happy.
Right,
Like, if we're comparing immediate short-term pleasures versus
right.
a sustained happiness, at least, yeah, that's what's being said. Okay.
Yeah,
Uh, and I guess growing, raising kids could be seen as a productive activity. That's what I remember it being
yes,
said somewhere. But
yes.
then, yeah, I mean, the reason I'm hung up on this now is because it does seem to be so rare where someone is really in love with their work. So it's
Yeah,
just so interesting that, and then yet this is like this is the key in objectivism. Hmm.
yeah. I think that's a big part of objectivism. Like even the characters that Rand portrays, it was always some admiration to people who produce such a degree, but also that the production makes them profoundly happy individuals.
Yeah.
Not that like just the work sets them free, as
Yeah.
that Nazi slogan went, but that it's deeper than that. It's that your work is part of your who you are, and it
Wow,
should bring
that's
you pleasure and happiness and joy.
uh yeah, wow, the quote you gave of work should set you free. That is kind of I'm not going to say dominant, but there are a lot of people in that situation. Um,
Yeah,
it's yeah, it's bizarre though because yeah, like why I don't know if you're going to have an answer to this because it's a random. It's going off topic, but like okay, work helps you cultivate reason. It gives you a purpose. It helps you cultivate self-esteem, and yet why do so many people seem to hate their work? It's such a weird thing. And they're not like people who resent existence. They're not Jim Taggarts or whatever.
Yeah.
They're just good people, and they just like really don't like, they talk about bureaucracy and politics, and uh, they don't like. It's so strange. Anyway, that's that, and yet it is like food for you, and it also not only is it like food, but it gives you all these extra bonuses.
Yeah,
Um,
I do think it's a distorted
Something's gone wrong.
understanding. It's what their understanding of work is. That, I mean, even Nazis thought of it in a, well, of course they thought of a bizarre way that, but I think the work sets you free line for Nazis in a concentration camp was saying it like to the Jews that,
Yeah, it was the
like, yeah,
Auschwitz. It was the sign on Auschwitz.
yeah.
Just work and we'll set you free. Yeah.
It makes me think that work was being portrayed as you do it because your soul has to, or so you must put up with it. Or I'm not even sure if there was a moral element to it, but that the work was treated as something distinct from what it enables you to do or what's even required of work. That if you're telling them work will set you free, that if you work will let you go or something, that's almost denying the fact that good work requires self-esteem and reason and your freedom and your ability to think. It's
I
like a
don't know.
reversal.
I think I agree, but I think something else has gone wrong. I don't know what it is because it's such a, how can it be that we enjoy eating a fruit and everyone does, but most people really dislike, like, yeah, I don't know. It's bizarre. I think it's more than just attitude and
Yeah,
belief on like because everyone knows work helps them survive, right?
yeah,
Even like, let's say, I don't know, pre 1900s, everyone would know that work is, you have to work not because it's a duty, but because you need to put bread on the table. But
yeah. There's so many ways you can answer that. So yeah, I mean that is a huge question. What leads them? What leads somebody in the direction that their work might even make them miserable?
right. And today we have such a enormous amount of options, and yet if you go by this philosophy and you agree that the best way to cultivate reason, purpose, self-esteem is through productive activity. If you lived like, I don't know, even 600 years ago in a small tribe, like theoretically, or at least on my understanding, you should be getting some pleasure from like going into the bush and hunting an animal or picking
Yes,
berries. And yet today, it's like people go through this torturous process of what work is for me, what work is for me. I'm not getting pleasure from my work, blah, blah, blah.
I think it's
I,
easier than it used to be to become detached from why you do any of this. Like, why do you go into a
ah,
cubicle and
yeah,
enter in data for 8 hours? Like, it's even more detached than, say, if you're a tribe of 10,000 years ago, you go
yeah,
into the woods and pick some berries. I mean, there's something more immediate in that action and activity than you
right.
are when you're just typing on a computer.
Yeah, I think it's more complicated because it might not just be work.
Sure.
Like, take the person in the cubicle. Maybe they had a family they didn't want to have, and they got married to someone they kind of like, but they're not really in love with, and they
Yeah.
don't have. So it's like then it's complicated because you don't know where to begin in figuring out why so many people dislike their work.
Right.
But yeah, okay. Anyway, we'll move
It
on
makes
because
me
it's
think of a comedy about that called Office Space. You
office
probably should look
space.
into. Yeah,
Okay, some guy in
it's
a
about,
cubicle.
yeah, like he saw no point to anything, and then one day he's hypnotized. They're trying to get him to stop smoking. It's like, you're gonna stop caring about work for a while. You just won't care. Won't you realize it doesn't matter? And then he couldn't. They couldn't wake him up, and he stayed hypnotized for like a week. So he goes to work, and he acts like he realizes it's all pointless, and he acts more honest and direct, and even says to you how he hates his job, and he goes in. It's just an interesting look at like when you change the way you're even valuing things, then it starts to seem absurd why you're doing any of it. It's comedic even.
I
It's a pretty
wrote
good
it
movie.
down. That's it. Oh, it's a movie. It's not a TV series. Office Space. Huh.
Yeah, it's
That's
a good movie.
interesting. Yeah, I think it's complicated, and I think you're right on maybe one part is there's more of a disconnect, and maybe we don't maybe we don't need to. If you live in a country where you pay 50% tax and you're barely keeping afloat and you're not able to, then it's an issue that's not about work. There's something else going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll move on from there and I'll think about that later. Okay, let's see what she says. This was a little quote. There's no question here at this point, but she made the observation that if you don't have a discipline of purpose, drop the discipline of purpose, which I think refers to a productive pursuit,
Yeah,
then
just
secondhand
diligence.
diligence.
Yeah, I think here they should have discipline, a pursuit, like when you're being disciplined in your use of it.
Right.
Or this purpose can make you disciplined, that there's an end it's everything's going towards.
Right.
Yeah, so I was interpreting it that way.
Oh, I didn't know. I didn't think about discipline that way. Discipline is behavior towards some end.
Yeah.
I never thought
And
it.
sticking
Cool.
to it. I mean, that was my initial thought, actually.
Yeah. Okay. But she made the observation that secondhandedness in some variant is the inevitable result of dropping the discipline of purpose. That's more of a psychological observation. I guess
Yeah.
one suggesting that we have to try and get some kind of substitute for these or we go crazy. And so people will do it in some way or another, whether it's through work or what she calls secondhandedness. Like,
Yeah.
but that is psychoanalysis more than.
Yeah, it's more psychological conclusion, which is, of course, harder to do, but you can validate it through psychology. And I think that one would actually be pretty easily validated. That one is pretty consistent enough that I think she's making an accurate observation.
Right. Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess my question here reduces to like, well, if you do go skiing and constantly work at increasing your performance, is that now work? Like, because they're saying that it's the sole means you can sustain an active mind. And I'm like, well, I don't know if that's really like, at least initially I was like, well, really? You can sustain your mind in many ways. And if you love going to parties and hosting them, that also seems goal directed. Like, I don't see why you suddenly lose control of your brain and actions if you don't have a purpose.
Work is necessary, not only materially.
Soul means sustaining an active mind and a goal-directed course.
I mean, it would seem that it seems to be discussing the value of work, which I think it could include skiing in this case, as long as it's like going towards some goal or purpose.
Oh, okay. You've got to have a purpose. That's the key.
Yeah, I mean, you need some kind of purpose here beyond just
right.
Not just the material, like, oh, like you're saying, you just need a paycheck to get by, like with that surfer. I mean, the work isn't just a matter of I need a paycheck to survive, to do my leisure stuff. Like, it's a spiritual way or the psychological motive behind anything, even that your purpose, whatever it might be, like the purpose behind your work has to be able to be integrated into your life and your overall purpose. Otherwise, it'll be kind of empty, or won't be as active, or you don't maintain as much control over your life as you might otherwise say. I mean, the point about parties might be difficult to argue about, but in general, like comparing, say, pure leisure, say, laying in a hammock reading versus you need to go out there and write a book of your own, something like that. I mean, those are distinctions that are valuable.
Okay, I can see that, I guess then, but then I would just say work is being used synonymously with purpose. So it's more of an issue of purpose rather than work itself, meaning I could set a purpose of like running really fun parties and then I keep every party I host, I like try find ways to improve it and like have people have more fun. Just to think of some weird example. And like, oh, next party I'll introduce this game and I'll like find new ways to get more people to come. Like that's a purpose. And so you're sustaining a thought process. Like whether or not that's long term a good purpose to have full time is a different question. But the point is like
Yeah.
in the fact in being a purpose, it gives an opportunity for thought. And so it's not so, I feel like where I was getting stuck is so work is actually just synonymous with purpose in this case. And then
Uh,
obviously because
yeah,
the chapter, yeah,
I would say it's concretizing the purpose that like we're not just talking about in the abstract, but the actual doing of stuff. Like if you're
yeah,
actually say tilling the soil of your garden or something like that. But I
yeah,
think that would be work as in, and it's just a concrete way of visualizing or
right,
referring to purpose.
right. And okay. And then if you don't have purpose, that just means like, well, what are you going to think about? So that's all it's saying, really. Like, if you don't have purpose, the only thing you can do is indulge in sort of a mindless pleasure and ride on your previous choices and hope you respond emotionally in a positive way. And that's not sustainable long term.
Or
That's what's
even that we couldn't think well if like we had six purposes, like you were saying, it became hard to even think about what to pursue or what
right.
not to pursue, that you need something more integrated than that to be able to handle all those activity.
Mm-hmm.
And without that purpose to organize it, it was just maybe just reaching out to whatever strikes you, or there's no
Yeah.
principled way to decide or how to act within your value hierarchy. It's
Yep.
just all over the place at that point.
Okay. And then you said work is a concrete instance of purpose. What would be some other concrete instances of purpose that come to mind that
Um,
would be considered rational?
Work, rational is always be in a context, but as far as what would be usual, just I don't know, running a private practice as a psychiatrist could be one thing that we can call that just
That's
work,
all
or we
work
could
though.
say, what'd you say?
That's all a kind of work. I mean, like, because you said that they used work as a substitute for purpose because it's a concrete instant, it's a kind of purpose. But then what other kinds would there be that could be substituted in here instead of work and still be rational? Is there anything else or no?
No, I can't think of another way to think of
Yeah.
productivity, at least. It's hard to say, is it exact? I don't exactly mean an instance of um, purpose, as more so I'm trying to say that you have a purpose and particular, and it's realized through particular actions of productivity. That has to be realized through
Right.
productive work. It has to be, I don't think it could be realized through anything else. That
Right.
leisure wouldn't bring you to that purpose. Or maybe you did have a purpose, but you had to think about how could leisure help bring me to that purpose. Or you
Right.
could say what's more fundamental, the work or the leisure. And if I would say the work,
Yeah. Okay.
and then the work would be like whatever particular instance you think of that brings you to that purpose, concrete things. So anything you could think of as work. And I don't think there'd be any other kind of activity that can bring you to purpose except productive work.
What about someone who plays chess professionally or poker professionally? What is the material value that apart from taking, winning money, what's the material value that is being created? And how is the world being shaped in their image of their values when they just play chess?
Yeah, I think that's one of the harder ways to answer that question. That like a professional sports person or a professional
Yeah.
gamer, that's really difficult. I think often, so I'm just going to mention some things that come to mind for that. So I know skills like that usually are dependent on your age, that you can't do them forever anyway. Whatever sport it is, you can't do it forever. That's some limitations, a long term plan.
Yeah.
Um, it could be used as a jumping off point to a further career or a later career. I mean, a lot of, say, even being a professional poker player, there isn't really much purpose to it other than just to make a lot of money and then do something with it. You could say maybe it enhances your ability to think, that you're training yourself intellectually to some further purpose or end. That it's, say, being a professional poker player may lead to some way to invest your money or spend your money in new ways. Or I don't know.
It's a bit of a stretch, but
Yeah, I mean that's the best I can do to
yeah.
answer the question.
Okay.
It's very difficult though, because
Right.
those are the more. That's almost like saying leisure becomes your work, and that's when it gets weird.
Yeah, that's where because I used to play a lot of poker online ages ago, and I was trying to
Yeah,
make money doing it. So that's why I'm curious if that was like, because that might not be. I remember I read briefly in I can't remember where it was, some Ayn Rand article or Q&A, and she was talking about chess and how this whole process of like going through if
yes,
this, then that, if this,
yes,
if he, that's not real, like that's not how your mind works in reality. It's not for, there's no other purpose for which that kind of, I think she called it an epistemology, is useful. And so it may be the case that those things pursued professionally are not like, yeah, of course, if you want to be performing in front of other people, that's one thing, but I don't think anyone pursues it for that reason. And so it could be the case that it's not healthy long term. I don't know, but I was
yeah,
curious for that reason because I
yeah.
once
That
did pursue.
yeah, very well might be the case that it's not a good pursuit to have. I mean, at least not for very long. I mean, may be interesting to practice for some time to understand how it works and just the thinking involved,
Yeah.
but maybe not as its own end. That
Mm-hmm.
you might do it because, oh, you're a mathematician, you study probabilities in a way of concretizing your thinking about it. So in that case, I would think, why not? But if you're going to say, I'm going to make my life out of this, I would think, no, that's probably not rational.
Some people
It's
do.
not. Yeah. But that's when it gets to the deeper questions. If you did a career just to make a lot of money, would it really fulfill you? And that's a deep question anyway, that probably been explored in so much literature anyway. So
But I mean, even in philosophy, it goes to, there's a disconnect because, you know, you gave the example of someone collecting berries. They know like, okay, well, I'm collecting the berries
yeah,
because there's nothing else to do and I need to survive. And so maybe they get pleasure out of that. But like what, someone who's like, what is money is just the symbol anyway. And so what is it like, what exactly is being pursued? It's not as clear. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
is it, are they trying to get a house? Are they, what material value do they actually want? I don't
yeah,
know. In that case, it's tricky. So
yeah. If
I
you
think
want
it's
to
easy to fall
evaluate,
into that trap though.
yeah, if you want to evaluate their choice and their decision, you would ask things like, well, why are you pursuing this? What do you care about a lot in life?
Yeah.
What do you want to get out of this? And then you could start to evaluate whether it's a productive effort or if it sounds arbitrary and just spontaneous and without any rational basis.
Well, I mean, you could pursue poker full time and it would seem
Yeah,
like there's a rational basis to make money, but it's still that question of like, is it good for you long term? Is it going to make you fulfilled because you're exercising reason, purpose, and self-esteem? I don't know.
yeah,
You're not really, I don't really see what's being produced. You're producing maybe entertainment for
right.
people who are playing against you and are not necessarily there to win money, but like gamble or something like that. But that hardly seems like a pleasurable, like, oh, okay, I make my money against people who come to gamble in the evening. And so I'm providing them that service and that's my source of, that seems kind of like, anyway, not as,
Rationalizing.
what's, no, it's not rationalizing. It doesn't seem like a particularly pleasurable way to make a living, but
No, it
it,
doesn't. I
but
agree
I
with you.
don't, but I don't know with chess and all that. It's like you said, I think it's complicated. So, um, okay, what about this? So is it right to say this argument is kind of circular in not circular as in like illogical, but just you work in order to exercise your virtues and work is a virtue. And so you exercise your virtues in order to get values, but you're working in order to exercise your virtues so you can get values. And your values include your work. Is there something weird about it? Because your purpose is your work, but you're working so you can exercise the other values. And so exercising those values helps you, not the values, exercising those virtues helps you get the values, but the values is work, is purpose. There's something circular about it.
The best way I can think of it is I've got the 3 cardinal values and then got all the virtues, and the virtues are a way to attain those cardinal values. That without those virtues, you would be unable to attain self-esteem, rationality, and productivity, or purpose rather.
Yeah, look,
And
this is relevant.
yeah,
See, look, this is why you work, because it incorporates the values and virtues of a proper existence, meaning work is a virtue and you work in order to exercise virtues so you can get values, and values are your work. There's something
go up to the blue part. You see the blue part again. Um, I don't think it's saying it is. Well, I do see what you mean, that there is a bit of circularity, because I mean virtues seem to be values, but if virtues are means to values, that would be circular, because you say the virtues bring you to your values, whereas your values bring you to your virtues. It seems like it would be saying both. I'm thinking it in terms of you have productive work that you do. Um, the
and the
activity
productive
is
work is a purpose, so that's a value.
I'm starting to think purpose here, I think refers to like a grand overall purpose, like life being a purpose. I think it seems to be more these grander things, the wider purpose, why we get up in the morning, and productive work is a means to that end. That productive work is an expression of your virtues, but the work itself is valuable because um, you're doing it, you're pursuing it, you're making use of it to attain that purpose, the overall bigger purpose. So I'm not thinking strictly in terms of it is a purpose as much as that it's a sub purpose of the great overall purpose,
Which
which is your
is
life and all that,
your
flourishing in your
life.
life. So it's a sub purpose, I guess I could say, that brings you to your overall wider purpose.
There's some quote I think that actually said it explained the see if I can find it, because in the essay The Objectivist Ethic, she said purpose is the choice, a choice you make, the choice of your happiness. So it actually didn't seem to be about life. That's why I remember it. It seemed to be I interpreted it as work, and so then it would seem circular, like you work in order to exercise virtues. But yeah, I mean, if it's just to be alive and just sustain your life, that's the purpose, then okay, I see that the work is the means to that purpose. But if it is a choice, I can't find it now. I don't want to spend lots of time, but yeah, but if work is part of your purpose as the abstract value, then it would be circular, right? Because you're saying work so you can exercise virtues, and then so you can attain the value of purpose, which is your work. But you're
Uh,
saying purpose is actually life, and then a sub purpose of purpose is well, life is the standard actually,
yeah,
and
it's
it's
standard.
yeah, life is the standard, and then the purpose is
I would still say it's life, that is the ultimate goal, the main objective of exist, like your goal as a living organism is to live. That is your goal. That is the purpose of anything. That's why you exist.
Right.
Or that would answer your question, like, what reason do I have to live? Well, life is its own reward and its own purpose, and anything else serves into that. And we could talk about, say, when we were distinguishing about central purpose, we were thinking of that as, say, what organizes your, or what did we conclude about that? That your central purpose, maybe you could have several, but it organizes all your other actions to bring you closer to life. Like it's sort of integrating work you do that brings you towards that end of life.
Okay. I did find here from the objectivist ethics, productive work as the central purpose and central value. That I'll paste it into. There we go.
Okay, that actually helps. Productive work as the central purpose and central value. Then I wonder what she means with the cardinal value. If this is a central value, I'm not sure how to interpret that. Central value and central purpose. Determines the hierarchy of all the
values. I'm sure there was more, like purpose is the choice, something of the choice of the happiness in which it wishes to pursue. And then it's, anyway, I'm not, maybe it is circular and that's fine. I don't know, but.
It seems like she's saying it's an integrating factor. Like it integrates the virtue and the means and the ends. Like the means being reason, the end being, I don't know, pride, say. And it integrates those two things together. That the productive work is where the reason goes and what transforms it into pride or some emotional consequence or some moral consequence. That without the productive work, you just got reasons and you just got emotions, but it's the thing that brings them together, that connects the spiritual and the spiritual values to the more concrete things.
Got it.
That's how I'm understanding this. Once you introduce that quote, I think that helped a lot. Because see, she's mentioning reason is the source of his productive work. Pride is the result.
Yeah.
So it seems like on either end, there's a consequence of your work and the source of your work, and it brings it all together.
I understand. That makes sense. And then, okay, cool. The ultimate goal is life, and then the concomitant of life is happiness, was the way it was explained. But in order to realize those, which is the ultimate value, these are the three cardinal values that help you realize life and happiness: the reason, purpose, self-esteem. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Makes sense. All right, let's go to, I'll just do this. Pride. Let's go to pride. Would you say values of character, would one way to look at it simply be, are they virtues that have been practiced a lot and that are habituated? Is that what that is?
I say so.
Okay.
Yeah, and the Aristotelian way for sure. Rand for sure, and that's maybe even more so in Aristotle. Like, if you ever read Nicomachean Ethics, the virtues are always about the things you do and cultivate. There's always character values, what you are as a person or what you might observe in others that makes them good. Whatever you believe makes them good. You can observe them in others. So yeah, this is character values.
Okay. We should, maybe we can speak about that at the end if we've got time. Then Nicomachean view of ethics.
Nicomachean ethics.
Nicomachean and values of character. Okay. Yeah, so if productivity, this isn't, I think I was being a bit rationalistic about it, but if productivity, I wrote, is producing the material values needed to sustain life, then I don't see why any unpaid work would be considered productive work under this definition, at least. But I guess that would include just producing a material value, but it doesn't need to sustain your life. It could sustain or give someone else pleasure, right? And sustain doesn't have to be just purely like, if it was just sustain life, then why make a TV? You can just, instead you could make some bread, some Russian rye bread for someone.
Yeah, and also I would say that if we're doing unpaid work, there's a couple of things you could ask about that. One is like, are you getting some sort of value out of that exchange or that work, or is some value being accumulated or acquired, or in
Right.
some way is your life being enhanced? And if it's not, then yeah, unpaid work would not be at all productive. If it'd be the exact opposite of that, we should go without saying almost. But since you would be unable to guide your own actions, that you're not even, if your work had nothing to do with your flourishing or anything like that, you just did it because it was free, or you gave something to somebody for free. It'd be like working for nothing, that there is no even spiritual exchange. It'd be unjust even because somebody's getting something without any kind of value exchange, even spiritual value, presumably.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I guess I was thinking of, like, let's say someone who's retired and volunteers in a
Yeah.
crisis call center or something. I'm
Yeah.
like, well, where does that fit in?
Okay. Yeah. Um, how would that fit? I think it could be seen as,
I suppose there's not enough specifics there. It's tricky because
yeah,
there's not
too
enough.
many
Like
vagues.
there's too much context that you'd need
Yeah.
to just. It's not a good example.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's ignore it because it's not an actual example of someone I can think of right now. So, uh, acceptance of reason as an absolute. Okay, yeah, it was a question of, like, I thought this is integrity, not the degree of your intelligence, but relentless use of your mind and acceptance of reason as an absolute. Isn't that just integrity? Like,
I think
integrity
so.
is you have an idea and you act in accordance with it. And okay, maybe the emphasis is on an absolute as an absolute. I don't know. I think some of the
Um,
virtues are not, like, as clearly distinguished for me. Like integrity would be an example of one that's not
I'm
as.
trying to see if Tara Smith makes a distinction. She might. Um, is there a difference?
I think maybe we can,
I
for
don't think there's.
productivity reasons, we can
Yeah, I
stick.
don't think there's any particular difference between integrity and moral perfection. Yeah, I can't tell. I'll let you know later if I find any distinctions.
So this will take us back to Aristotle, actually. So it's a good segue into Aristotle
Mhm.
in the time we have. So he talks about second nature, apparently, and then that, and so maybe you can tell me. So what he just analyzes people and says the whole purpose of ethics is to cultivate certain habits, and which maybe is that it synonymous for values of character? Would you say the habits or the second nature that Aristotle talks about?
Within Aristotle, yeah, from my understanding, yeah, that's what he means by virtues. And he has more virtue, like intellectual virtues and other virtues, and all kinds of virtues. But yeah,
Okay.
They're
And
all character traits.
for him, what was the purpose of cultivating those virtues?
I think mostly because that's what leading the good life entailed. That
Ah,
you
so it's a
observe
good life.
people that lead the good life, or whatever it is you might define it as, and you just try to imitate them to attain that good life. But he also has some of the intellectual virtues, which are more just acquired through reason, that your reasoning can bring you to understand what they are. You don't get them by observing people. But say when you
Okay.
mean pride and things like that, they're all things you have to acquire through. You observe them in others and you do it yourself.
Okay. So he in a way was looking for like the goal of his ethics is happiness, the good life. That it's the same thing, right? But the way he's done it is to look and observe and see who is happy and then what are they doing and find the similarities and differences. Is that a
Yeah, I
accurate?
think to some extent he thought some people just knew and they always did the thing. And so all you do is see them and try to do what they do to attain something similar. And that
Right.
was a lot of what it is.
Right. Okay. That's quite interesting. But maybe that's where you have to start by looking around and seeing different people
Yeah.
and how they're living and who seems to be most happy.
Yeah. And he acquired intellectual virtues by figuring out how does reasoning work? How does thinking work? And what's the
Right.
point of that? Which was
Right.
a little different.
Yeah. Okay.
But
So
he
it was.
thought about so much about having at least these kind of virtues, like cultivating your actions and
Did you
behavior.
write anything about like what happens if you do one thing that is unvirtuous once? Does it have an effect on you or anything like that? Because then he would be getting into habits, wouldn't he?
I can't tell if I don't know actually.
Okay. All right. Um, all right. This later on, it's talking about. I guess this is in relation to the value of self-esteem. I've bolded it. So, evolutional being cannot accept self-preservation or the ultimate value, which is his life, as his purpose, unless taking a moral inventory, he concludes that he's qualified for the task, qualified in terms of ability and value. Like, isn't it circular? Because in a sense, you're not given self-esteem. And so, but you're not going to commit suicide because you're not given self-esteem. You're going to choose, all right, well, now I need to go out and try things and see what happens. And then over time, if I have success, I cultivate self-esteem. But if I don't cultivate self-esteem. But it's circular in the sense that like you have to accept self-preservation before you get self-esteem.
Right. Yeah, it wouldn't be logical. It would be poor reasoning. But I think here, do you remember when I said that the cardinal values are basically simultaneous? That having one, like, well, they all exist at the same time and they affect and impact each other.
I remember you telling me about the gold bar from
Yeah.
Plato. Yeah.
Well, the cardinal values, I think, are integrated in the sense that, say, well, that they occur at the same time. That your use of reason is itself generates self-esteem and is productive, or it will bring you to productivity. That all those things occur at once. That if you have self-esteem, it means your reason is functioning. You can get them at the same time. It's not that one has to lead to the other, but they all exist simultaneously. Like they're all aspects of the same thing. They're all aspects of living, but we can isolate them when we discuss what is it that makes somebody able to live their life. We can distinguish different aspects of the way they act and behave. They have productivity. They use reason to do these things, and they feel good about accomplishing these things. And they all occur together because they're all part of the same thing that already exists. I mean, pursuing life, whatever capacity it is, no matter how poorly or how well you do it, you can still observe those aspects of living, that there is thinking about how to attain goals. There's specific activities you do to live that life, and there's a emotional impact that it has when you do these things, and they all happen at once together. Does that make sense?
So you're basically saying it's not possible for someone. Well, it's not. That's not true. You're saying like in the process of even being alive, you're in some way exercising all those values. So it's not like you can conclude in full that you're not qualified. It's not like you start from a blank of like, I'm not qualified in terms of ability and value, and you slowly build it. Like you're saying that just in living, you're cultivating the three in just still being alive, in
Right.
just pursuing anything really. To some extent, you're going to cultivate those three. That's what I sort of got. But I mean, here he talks about taking a moral inventory and then concluding that you're qualified for the task. Like that's what
Yeah.
unless he means like a subconscious feeling of like, am I, do I have ability and do I have value?
I guess the distinction here is, what difference will it make if you decide this volitionally and concretely? Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't see how we could say one could come first, though. And even if you're doing it consciously and volitionally, I'm not sure you really could say one is the right way to go about it. Like, I could
yeah,
answer him like, unless he has concluded that he is qualified in terms of ability and value. But then, or you could say, but he can't pursue anything until he knows he can reason.
right,
How will you have self-esteem unless you even
right.
know what abilities and values are to even decide these things? And I don't like the way he phrased this. It does
Yeah,
sound
okay.
circular to me. It doesn't. He's not making a distinction with, um, well, if you're consciously deciding it, I agree you should consciously take an inventory of these things and realize what they are. But I think you have to identify them all together. Even I don't think you can identify them isolated.
Okay. Anyway, we can, yeah, I didn't get it, but all right, let's go to
Well, I think you
this.
have the
And
general idea, though. You'll think about it more and you'll get it eventually. But it is one of the more difficult things. It did take me a while to understand that in a more holistic way. Like, I felt like I understand it took a while.
so this is initiation of physical force, and it says an example of indirect use of force would be gaining someone's property by fraud, and it draws the line at property. But property, from what I read later, the whole reason for the concept of property existing is that we we have to produce to survive, and so by if you've produced that value, that's the means of your survival. It is a part of you. And so there's such a thing as property. And it says it would be initiating force if you indirectly acquire something by fraud, a property of someone else by fraud. And it's force because they haven't exchanged it for value. You've tricked them in some way, and that's their life. They're giving you part of their life, and you've taken some of their life from them. That's my understanding of the initiation of physical force when it's indirect. But it draws the line there. And I was thinking, well, if that's true, then if someone told you a lie, and let's say they said, I don't know, they told you they were a certain kind of person, and you believed them and you spent the whole day with them. And so you've spent some of your life. That's your life as well. Like, yeah, your property is your life, but so is your time. So can't you apply the same reasoning and say, well, because someone lied to me and now, or like take apart like a couple and the lady in the relationship cheated on the man and she didn't tell him for a year. Like, can you also apply this concept and say, well, that's an initiation of physical force because he spent his life with her for another year when maybe he wouldn't have. That's his life. Does
Um,
that make sense? Because the reasoning is to acquire property by fraud is force because property is your life, but so is your time. Your time is your life.
Fraud. I'm trying to think of a good example of fraud. I guess, like you're saying, you're selling one thing, but it never was that thing.
Yeah.
Why
So
would that
someone's
be
giving you their
forced?
money, like someone's giving you their money, or you've just paid someone monopoly money for their house.
Yeah.
And so now they thought they were getting money, but they got monopoly money, which is not worth anything. And so that would be considered force, right?
Yeah. Trying to think of how to define this clearly when fraud is force. I mean, yeah, just telling a lie, I don't think would count as spending time with someone who's like they're taking your value from you or like seeking out something control from you. I mean, it first begins by thinking about what you have control over and what control is being denied for you that you should have control over. Like you should have control over your own car. So um, anyone that takes over that control or takes away from you without you recognizing or even though you deserve to control it, then that's initiation of force. So the question to fraud would be in what way are they taking control of something that you have control over but never told them they could use it? Um, the hard thing about fraud is to what extent is it you just making a bad decision and they really did genuinely think they're going to make that exchange with you, and that it's not that you were tricked, or even if you were tricked, it's not being tricked. It's just a matter of did you think about it thoroughly? Um, trying to think what else to say about that. What would make it fraud or make it force? And false pretenses is one thing, but I have a hard time giving you a good answer,
Yeah. Okay.
actually.
Yeah. I. Yeah.
It's all about what you ought to have control over, and if you don't have control over what you should control, then that's initiation of force against you
Yeah.
if like
Okay.
somebody took it over.
Okay. But your time, for example, is something you don't have control over.
That's
Like,
harder to say.
yeah,
To what extent
it's
should you control that?
it's yeah. Anyway, we can okay. I can see it would be a difficult one, and you probably need someone who's like knows the legal aspect of it quite well. But
Yeah, that's why I sent that Tara Smith chapter. Like if you
so yeah, I'll go
really
over
want to
that.
get this, that would be
I'll
the
go.
best way to go to
I
look
will.
into that more.
I'll do
Yep.
that for sure. Okay.
Yep.